Hey there, folks. So this morning I want to talk to you guys a little bit about introductions. Introductions are a great way to capture your reader's attention. It helps you keep it when you show them that the plan that you're using throughout the rest of your essay matches up with the plan that you identify in your introduction. Makes sense, right? If your reader trusts what they're seeing and they see that you're following through on what you've identified, well then goodness, how can they not be one step toward believing what you're trying to say? All right, so in this video, you'll see a little bit of information about introductions and how to keep a reader's attention once you get it. All right, so let's start off with some questions. Okay, just some basic ones. Okay, what's in an introduction? Well, an introduction gives the reader everything that they need to know as far as context to be able to understand what you're trying to say. Okay, it makes them want to keep reading. That's the whole point. It gives them an idea of what you're talking about and kind of pushes them to continue on the path that you set out for them. Okay? Now, should a thesis statement go? It should be the last sentence in your intro, right? You know how everyone always makes a big deal out of getting the last word in an argument? Well, your thesis statement should get the last word of your introduction. And the reason for that is that last word is what people are going to remember before you dive right into explaining why you feel the way you feel. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. Thesis statement should be the last sentence of your intro. Okay, now, what's the function of an introduction and a thesis statement? Well, together, they not only provide enough context for your reader to understand where you're coming from, but then they also tell your reader where you're planning on going. Okay, those are the big things. So you want to keep that in mind as you're writing your introduction. Now, why do we use them? For just that same reason. Okay, gives the reader a heads up, provides them with any necessary information, and then helps propel them forward. What sort of things should you include in your introduction? Well, that's a really good point. I've mentioned context before, but really, what is context? Context is anything that your reader needs to understand before you really dive into specifics about what you're writing. Think about it like this. If you're talking about, let's see, Shark Week just happened. So I'm a big Shark Week person. So before they start talking specifics about the types of sharks that are being maybe tagged or video recorded, for example, they want to tell you a little bit about the area that they're in, right? Because if they start, just randomly tagging tiger sharks per se, and you're sitting there going, wait a minute, I thought maybe it looks like they're up north? Like, why are tiger sharks up there, right? They need to provide the context that you need. Once they say, okay, we're in tropical or subtropical waters, you go, oh, okay, yeah, tiger sharks go there, right? That makes sense. But you want to make sure that you give the reader just that necessary information that they need to go on, okay? Then you could also use a personal narrative, right? It's a little bit more difficult since you can't use I, me, you, that sort of thing. But at the same time, you can flip it, just like I discussed in the video I posted last week about how to use personal examples without bringing yourself into it, right? You identify these things in a universal way. So a narrative can be a really helpful way to do it. Now, I would recommend against using questions. And the reason that I do that is because you never know what answer your reader is going to give. Right? You ask a rhetorical question, you assume they're going to say yes, and they go, what? No. All of a sudden, you've lost them, okay? And maintaining that trust between you and the reader is really, really important. What you can't control is the reader's reaction to what you're saying. What you can control is how you're guiding the reader, okay? As bad as this sounds, writing is all about manipulation to an extent. Right? You can control how you say things, what you say, and you can use that to mold the reader's mind. So a well-crafted argument, even one that doesn't necessarily hold water, if it's done well, your reader, might get tricked into believing what you're trying to say. So how should an introduction be formatted? Well, there's a few things that you need to have in your introduction. One is a hook. Okay, first and foremost, something to get your reader's attention right off the bat. Okay, then you have a bridge. Just as it sounds, the bridge connects the hook to what? Well, the thesis statement. Okay, so you've got your hook, you've got your bridge, and you've got your thesis. Those are the main points of your introduction paragraph. Now, keep in mind too that you want to use a funnel method. Think about the shape of a funnel, right? You start out broad, work your way narrow, and it gets to the narrowest point right at the bottom. Well, that's kind of how your intro should be, right? So your hook is kind of separate from that. You can be as specific as you need to be in your hook to get someone's attention. But then in your bridge, you want to make sure that you are, staying broad, identifying these broad concepts that your reader needs to understand to move on, narrows into something more specific, and then narrows even further into your thesis statement. Okay, and keep in mind that your thesis statement should be the most specific sentence in your introduction. Let's look at the different parts of the introduction and the funnel method. So here's an example. Okay, the economic recession of 2007 has been one of the most severe downturns in America's economic history since the Great Depression. That's the hook right there. Because your reader's going to sit there and go, wow, I've heard of the Great Depression. I lived through the economic recession of 2007. Was it really that bad? Right? And then they're going to want to read more. So it's about identifying what is going to make your reader want to continue. All right, so now that we've got that hook in place, let's continue. So virtually no American citizen has been exempt from feeling the effects of the recession. All around the nation, people are taking drastic and necessary steps to confront this new economic landscape. Citizens are making several changes to the way that they live their everyday lives, and most importantly, how they spend their money. Ordinary American citizens are coping with the economic recession by eliminating the purchases of non-essential products, expanding their educations, and finding additional ways to supplement their primary incomes. So, right at the end, we see our thesis statement, okay? Our thesis statement is that last sentence that begins with ordinary American citizens, okay? And it identifies the statement of purpose and the forecast elements that the essay is going to discuss. So the reader knows the essay is going to be all about how ordinary American citizens are coping with the economic recession, and they know that they're going to be talking about it in terms of eliminating the purchases of non-essential products. That's going to be body paragraph 1. Expanding their educations, body paragraph 2, and finding additional ways to supplement their primary incomes, body paragraph 3. So, what happened in between that hook and that thesis? Well, let's take a look, okay? Let's kind of dig in a little bit deeper here. So we can see that these different kind of ideas keep popping up throughout the introduction, right? They do, right? The idea of the economic recession, and then it's identified as the recession, the economic landscape, money, right? Money's part of the economy, and then economic recession again. Now, the reason for kind of switching around as we go through the introduction is so that you can continue to remind the reader what you're talking about without seeming repetitive. So if we called this the economic recession every single time we talked about it, your reader might sit there and just go, oh my goodness, they're just repeating economic recession over and over and over again, right? And that could happen. And you want to avoid that happening in your essay. Okay, so make sure to vary the language that you're using. Now, you can also see that we have some other things that carry through, right? The idea of American citizens, the people, right, which are a representative of American citizens. Citizens again, ordinary American citizens, right? So you're seeing this language kind of pop up, but everything happens in between. So your reader sits there and goes, okay, well, I know we're talking about people. I know we're talking about the economic recession. And then your thesis statement is like, boom, we're talking about people during the economic recession, and we're talking about them in these ways, right? So it gives the reader an opportunity to get used to the idea that the essay is going to argue, and helps develop, that connection between the reader and the writer. Now, let's look a little bit further here at the funnel method here. So we have this, right? The economic recession, right? So we see that the economic recession is the major part of that first hook, right? That's the big thing, comparing it to the Great Depression, but the economic recession is the most important. And then we see, okay, no American citizen has been exempt from the feelings of what? Of the recession. Oh my goodness, we just narrowed it from the recession to the United States, right? And then in the next sentence, all around the nation, people are taking drastic and necessary steps to confront this new economic landscape. Okay, so we just went from economic recession in general to economic recession in the United States. And now we're in economic recession in the United States, and the steps that people are taking to combat that recession and to survive, right? Okay, so we've just done those 3 steps. Well, let's see. So citizens are making several changes to the way they live their everyday lives, and most importantly, how they spend their money. Oh my goodness, we've just narrowed it even further, right? We went from economic recession to American citizens dealing with the economic recession to taking steps to deal with the recession, and then making changes in terms of their money. Those are the steps that they're taking, right? So you want to guide the reader through your ideas. And then we get into the thesis. And by this point, your reader's like, okay, well, if I had to guess, we're probably talking about the types of steps that the American people are taking to combat the economic recession. And guess what? Oh my goodness, that's what the thesis is about. So the thesis is about the steps that these people are taking, right? And in turn, because the thesis is about these steps, well, guess what? The essay is about these steps. Oh my goodness, guys. Oh my goodness. So, the moral of the introduction, right, the whole point of having it, right, is to transition between ideas, right, that are all relevant to that overall argument that you're making. If you have a stray sentence in there that doesn't help you, get rid of it. There's no need, okay? We have a finite amount of time to convince someone of something in an essay, whatever it is, or to describe something to someone. Don't waste that time with something that's not important to convincing your reader, okay? That's more important. And you want to keep in mind that you should narrow your ideas in your introduction down to your thesis statement so that your reader can almost predict what's coming without them feeling like it's being repetitive. Okay, so just keep those things in mind as you're writing your introduction, and you will be on the right track. Thanks guys for watching this video. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.